Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang Dhammang Sanghang Namasami. So I'd like to welcome everyone this evening. Um, so this morning at the monastery here, we had our normal Saturday morning program. Had a bit of meditation. We had a Dhamma talk. And then after the meal, we had question and answers, or just, open time for anyone who wants to come and chat with the monks or chat with each other. So after the meal today, a few of the lay people came up and were having a chat with me. And one of the things that subjects which came up in this conversation that we were talking about was the idea of craving, of greed, of this unwholesome desires, and just that, and how they manifest in life. So, how someone can have greed for stuff, greed for wealth, greed for all kinds of things like this. And, some of these lay people were bringing up, examples from, modern life, from the real world, from the news, from celebrities and stuff. And we were talking about how greed, just kind of one of the fundamental principles of Dhamma is just that greed is never overcome by indulging in that greed. So our cravings, in the second noble truth, the Buddha taught that, this craving, this tanha, that, this is the cause of suffering. And he taught us that, this craving is never overcome by indulging that craving. So, it's the example I use all the time is that, if you really want, a piece of cake or something, you have a strong craving for cake, you have this desire for cake. It's never overcome by eating enough cake. You never get to that point where you eat that perfect piece of cake and you never desire it anymore. The way we overcome this is by removing that craving, the third noble truth, that there is a cessation, an ending to this craving, and it's by abandoning that. And we do this by developing the our practice, our the Eightfold Path. But as we were talking about it this morning, one of the things was that came up is that, this is just so not, present in the modern world. It's not present in a lot of our cultures, our society. There's just not an idea of a different way to live. It's just the goal that so many people have in life is just to get more, get more money, get more fame. I guess nowadays it's get more likes and followers on social media, or whatever these goals and these aims that people have in life. And from a Buddhist perspective, we're saying that these don't lead to the end of suffering. These aren't going to bring any type of long lasting happiness into our life. But it's important for us to remember that sometimes, we can hear that, we can hear these teachings about, how getting stuff and all this is just going to lead to more suffering. So sometimes, we may think, okay, so, you know, um, rich people are inherently going to have more defilements, and poor people are inherently going to become more pure. And it's not always like that. You can see in the time of the Buddha, under the lay people who were enlightened, some of them were rich people, some of them were poor people. It really comes down to how you relate to this yourself. So in the suttas, there's this really beautiful simile. It's called the simile of the quail. And it was talking about monks going forth, lay people, laymen going forth and becoming monks. And so the Buddha started off by, talking about one layman, and he was saying that this layman, kind of everything in his life wasn't great. Like he had a terrible house, he had a terrible job. He could only afford like the worst food. His wife was not a very nice person, and just everything in his life was what we'd think wouldn't be very great. But he was really attached to this, and he couldn't give up this stuff to go forth and become a monk. So the Buddha compared this to a quail. So a quail's like a little, like almost kind of like a little chicken or a little like forest bird. And he was saying that um, you know, he was saying that if you have a rotten vine, just this creeper, this vine, like a person, that's not very strong. A lot of times you can just break those with your hands. They're not that strong. But he said to a quail, if you were to um, uh, tie this quail up with this rotten vine, it would be a strong bond for it. Like it would be a strong fetter or a strong bond, and that quail wouldn't be able to get away from that rotten vine. And then he said, in other cases, you get some laymen who want to go forth and become monks, and they come from the exact opposite. Materially everything was great. They've got like lots of money, a wealthy family, the big house, a beautiful wife, all these things, who treats them nicely, and all these things that externally we would nowadays view as like success in life, that these things people are chasing in life. um, but to this man, he's able to give them up. He's able to let go of those, and he's able to go and ordain as a monk. He said, even though those things, we'd look at them and we'd think they were like, bringing it back to that simile, would be like big, thick leather bonds. Like these were really, we would think would be really strong bonds. But he said, if you tried to tie an elephant up with those, thick leather straps and stuff, you tried to tie an elephant up, the elephant could just walk right out of those, for something so big and powerful, what we would think would be strong bonds is nothing to them. So with these things, with wealth, with all these things we've accumulated in life, these are, again, it's going to be the way we relate to them, the way we attach to them, the way we hold on to them. But for us as monks, of course, we have to give all that up. We let go of all that stuff. We give up our money, we give up our lands, we give up our wealth, we give up all that to ordain as a monk. I mean, I was 21 at the time, so I didn't really have any of that. So it wasn't too difficult to give up, uh, and but we have to give that all up. But again, you can still develop attachments. So one of our really senior monks, Ajahn, he likes to tell this story. I'm pretty sure it's not a true story, but it's a good teaching story. He said, there was this man, and he was this very rich man, and he had really gotten into Dhamma practice. He really loved Dhamma. He would practice, and just really, really, this became Buddhism. It became an important part of his life. And so he had a lot of faith in the monks. So he invited this one teacher, this one monk he had a lot of faith in, to his house for the meal. And again, it's a big house, like a big manor house, and they're sitting out in the garden, having the meal. And there's, servants and maids and all that kind of stuff, like one of those styles of houses. And the meal's done, and or sorry, they have the meal inside, and they come outside afterwards, and they're having a chat, and they're talking about Dhamma. And one of the servants comes out, and he whispers into the layman who owned the house. He whispers in his ear, oh, there's a fire. The house is on fire. Um, and this layman said, I don't care. I don't care about that stuff. I just want to listen to the Dhamma right now. Don't worry about that. And then the monk said to him, what did that servant just say to you? And then the man said, oh, he just said the house is on fire, but that doesn't matter. And the monk goes, oh no, my bowl is in there. So, so it's you know, even having few things, you can still get attached to it. It's just it comes to the way we hold on to it. But for us, for what we want to do is when we come to practice, we're not whether you have a lot or you have a little, you just practiced uh contentment with that. The last king of Thailand, King Rama the Ninth, he had this project called like this sufficiency economy. And so it was, it was just based on whether you have a lot or whether you have little, you practice contentment with this. As long as you have enough, you practice contentment with this. And because in the world, there's some people they're always wanting to have the most, to have more than other people, comparing to other people. But there's always going to be someone who has more than you. When I was a novice, just about to ordain as a monk, I went with a couple other monks to go pay respects to a very senior teacher, Lumpur Mahamon. He was one of the most senior disciples of Lumpur Cha, and especially alive at that point. And we went to pay respects to him, and he was giving me, a lot of encouragement and advice for becoming a monk. But one of the other monks I went with, he had been a monk about 2 or 3 years, and and Lumpur Mahamorn just started giving him this real encouragement. And it was really strange because it was really like specific encouragement he gave him with no like prompting to it. And he was just telling him, don't worry about not being the smartest person. There's always going to be someone smarter than you. And he said, what you really need to work on is not being the smartest, it's being good. And you don't want to be the smartest, just be a good person. And this is really, when we come to practice, this is something we're really developing. We're really working on developing our own inner goodness. And, we do this, by practicing the path, by, developing mindfulness, developing wholesome mind states, getting rid of the unwholesome mind states, keeping our sila, practicing generosity. And so over time, we start building this goodness and this real goodness in our own hearts. But for a lot of people, this is a hard thing for us to I don't not accept, but this is a hard thing for us. A lot of us, especially coming from the West, can be so self-critical and we can be so hard on ourselves that it's hard for us to see or accept our own inner goodness. So Lumpur Sumedho, who still is the most senior Western disciple of Lumpur Cha, and so he's in his 90s now, and he was telling us that in his generation in America, that they were what he called, being real, was being really hard on yourself, being really critical on yourself. So he was very, very self-critical, very hard on himself, which a lot of us are, and the first time he went to go see Lumpur Cha because he had ordained at a different monastery. And then he met this English-speaking monk who brought him to see Lumpur Cha. And he said the first advice Lumpur Cha gave him was to reflect on his own inner goodness. And so, for a lot of us, that's really hard, right? We're so hard on ourselves. We can be so self-critical. Like if you ever took the way we speak to ourselves in our heads, in our own inner monologue, most of us would never speak to someone else like that. It would sound so harsh, so almost ridiculous in the way it is. But we'll talk to ourselves like that. And so then, switching the other way and being like, oh, we're actually supposed, reflecting on the good stuff we do. A lot of us will think, oh, that's just being conceited. That's just building up the ego. That's just, inflating yourself. But Ajahn Nando was explaining it really well once. He said, we're trying to keep our mind in the middle, without going off into one extreme or going off into the other extreme. So to the left or the right, these different extremes. So with us, especially when we start getting really self-critical, we've pulled off our into one extreme. And so, reflecting on your own goodness, it can bring you back. It can bring you back into the middle. And it even goes back to the Buddha. The Buddha in some of these reflections that he gave us, these ways to meditate, you have dana anusati, like the recollection of generosity, sila anusati, like the recollection of our morality, of the way we behave. So when I was living with Lumpur Biak, one of the things he one day was telling the lay people in the morning Dhamma talk was that if they are sitting there and they're not able to meditate, like the mind's just thinking and they can't keep it still. He was saying one of the things to do is he said, start doing this reflection on generosity. So he said, start bringing up and thinking about times you've practiced generosity. You've given food to the monks or whatever type of generosity you've done. And he said, this can really help calm the mind and help brighten the mind. And again, it's a wholesome thing. You're reflecting on these wholesome things you've done and bringing up wholesome mind states from it. Again, we want to keep in the middle. So it's not getting to one of those things where you start reflecting on yourself and being like, oh wow, I'm the greatest thing that's ever happened to Buddhism since the Buddha. Or, we don't want to get into those extremes, but actually just say, oh, actually, I've done good. I'm improving myself. I'm working on it. Keep the attitude work in progress. But yeah, it's like actually I did really good on this. And you can bring up these wholesome mind states. Or when I first went to Wat Pah Nanachat, the abbot at the time, when we every 2 weeks the monks, all Buddha, Theravada Buddhist monks, and it goes right to the time of the Buddha. Every 2 weeks on the full moon and the new moon, all the monks living together or living in a certain area, they'll all get together, and one of the monks will recite the rules. And the way we practice in Thailand is that the monk had to memorize it and recite them from memory in Pali. And when I first arrived at Wat Pah Nanachat, the abbot at the time, he would be sitting, eyes closed in meditation the whole time. And he had just this big smile on his face while he was meditating. And I was asking one of the other monks who, had a few more years at the monastery than me, asking him about it. And he was saying what the Ajahn was doing was he was, as we were listening to the rules and, our sila, our morality that monks are keeping, he said that was what the abbot was reflecting on. He was reflecting on morality. He was reflecting on his own sila. And okay, in this last 2 weeks, I've done a good job. I've kept my sila. I've kept these rules. I've worked really hard on that. And yeah, at least from the outside, it looks like he was really getting some wholesome mind states out of it. So, so for us, this is a way to practice. This is a way to, you know, um, bring up wholesome mind states and really get over that negativity we can have to ourselves or that comparing we have to other people. So a lot of times, we're always comparing to other people. And in Buddhism, this is what we call conceit. Generally in like in the West, in English, when we talk about conceit, what we usually mean is thinking I'm better than this person. I'm so great. I'm better than this person. But when the Buddha talked about conceit, he actually said there's three types of conceit. There's the I think I'm thinking you're better than someone else, thinking you're less than someone else, and also thinking you're the same as someone else. So basically, anytime you compare yourself to someone else, this is conceit. And like I was saying earlier, there's always going to be someone better, So there's always going to be something, or that you feel or you view as something better. Because a lot of times, when we start comparing, it can get our comparisons can be, based in delusion, not always true, or we're looking at it from the wrong angle. I remember a few years ago, one of my cousins who I'd never met before died. And we were the same age, just a few months apart, but because of, family stuff, I'd actually never met him and didn't know anything about him. And so when he died, all these details about him came out. And one of the things was he would come to Thailand every year to practice Muay Thai. And so every year he'd have this like Thai vacation and this trip to Thailand. I remember listening to that and I was like, oh wow, that's really cool. He goes on this, trip every year, Thailand's like kind of part of his life and everything like that. And then his thinking is like, wow, I've never done that kind of thing. And I've never done something like that before. And then I catch myself and I was like, wait, I live in Thailand. I was like, and I was in Thailand at the time. You just, you can completely forget that. And you can get, when you start like comparing, you can kind of forget what you've got and just seeing what someone else has or, situations like this. And again, anytime you're comparing, you're building up that sense of self that I'm better, I'm worse, just all that idea of self. So so I'd like to offer this to everyone as a bit of a reflection for this evening.